The night was quiet on the edge of New Ember City, a strange mix of old human buildings and dragon-built towers that reached into the clouds. The wind carried a faint smell of smoke and metal. Glowing lights flickered over the dusty streets, and above it all hung the sign of a small place called Ember's Den, a diner that stayed open long after midnight inside. A young woman named Lila wiped the counter with a towel. The last of the night crowd had gone home. Only a few sleepy travelers remained, their heads resting on their arms. She liked the quiet hours, when the noise faded and the air smelled of coffee and oil. Her apron had old burn marks on it. Her hands always smelled faintly of metal polish from fixing the machines in the back. She wasn't rich, but she was proud. She had built a small life here, among dragons and humans who tried to forget the war that had nearly destroyed them all. The sound of the door chime made her look up. It wasn't the usual soft jingle. It was a heavy sound, like metal scraping against stone. The air grew warmer. The shadows stretched, and she saw them, 4 dragons entering in humanoid form, each towering over the doorway, their eyes like burning gems. The lights dimmed for a moment as their scales caught the reflection of the neon. The room froze. Everyone knew dragons rarely came here, and never in groups. Lila felt her throat tighten but kept her polite smile. She had seen aliens, soldiers, even cyborgs, but dragons were different. They carried the memory of war on their backs. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward. His horns polished like black glass, his eyes deep gold. He looked around slowly before speaking, his voice low and rough. 4 fire brews hot. Lila nodded, forcing her hands to stay steady as she poured the thick, glowing liquid from the tap. Her mind ran wild. She had heard stories about dragons like him, warriors from the Great Flame Wars, veterans who had burned ships and cities, survivors of the Old Front, their names whispered in war songs. She had never thought one would sit in her diner. She placed the mugs before them, each steaming with heat. The dragon's claws tapped against the table, leaving faint scorch marks. Lila noticed one of them staring at the old photo on the wall behind the counter. It showed her and her mother both smiling, her mother's shoulder bare, revealing the strange mark she used to joke about. A dragon tattoo. A mark of fire and wings. Lila never thought much of it. Just something her mother got when she was young. The leader dragon's eyes stayed on the photo, his golden pupils narrowing. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Where did you get that picture?" Lila blinked, confused. "That's just me and my mom," she said softly. "Why?" The dragon leaned closer, his nostrils flaring as he studied the image. The room felt smaller, hotter. "Your mother," he said slowly. "She has our mark." Lila frowned, nervous now. "It's just a tattoo," she tried to laugh. "My mom always said it looked cool. Maybe she saw your kind on TV or something." The dragons didn't laugh. The air thickened. The leader's hand trembled slightly, his claws scraping the table. The other dragons watched him with wide eyes. Something old and dangerous flickered between them. He whispered again, almost to himself. No human could bear that mark and live. Everyone in the diner could feel the tension. One of the human customers stood up to leave, but the dragon's tail lashed out across the floor, blocking the exit. "Sit," the leader growled. "We are not finished." His gaze locked on Lila. Her heart pounded. But she didn't back away. She met his gaze, her voice steady though her hands shook slightly. "My mom has your tattoo," she said again, but this time louder. The words hit like a thunderclap. The dragons froze completely. Their golden eyes flickered with firelight. One of them hissed in shock. Another muttered something in the old dragon tongue. The leader rose slowly, his chair cracking under his weight. "What did you say?" he demanded. Lila's voice didn't break. She looked straight at him. "I said my mom has your tattoo." Silence filled the diner, the air heavy and still. The coffee machines hummed softly in the corner. Outside, the neon sign buzzed, red light flashing across their faces. The leader dragon's chest rose and fell with a deep growl. Like a volcano holding back eruption, his eyes studied her face, the curve of her jaw, the dark hair, the small scar under her chin, details that stirred an old memory buried deep beneath centuries of smoke and flame. He turned to the others. "It cannot be," he said, his voice trembling for the first time. "She was human." The smaller dragon leaned forward, his voice a rasp. "General Vakor, you saw her die in the last battle. The mark of fire was lost with her." Vakor didn't answer. He took one slow step toward Lila, the floor creaking beneath his weight. "Your mother's name?" he asked. Lila hesitated, her lips parted. "Mira," she said softly. "Mira Dawn." The name hit him like a blade, his wings twitched beneath his cloak. Memories rushed back. Battlefields under burning skies, a human woman with fire in her eyes, standing beside dragons, not as prey but as equal. His hand trembled as he whispered, "Mira of the Firefront." Lila's brow furrowed. "You knew her." Vakor looked down at his clawed hands, the edges glowing faintly orange. "She saved me," he said. "Saved my whole flight." He met her gaze and his voice lowered, filled with something between awe and grief. "If what you say is true, then you carry the blood of the flame." Lila felt a strange chill run through her chest. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Vakor's eyes darkened. "It means your mother was not supposed to have a child." The words sank deep, the tension unbroken. The dragons exchanged glances heavy with fear and disbelief. Outside, thunder rolled through the city sky. Shaking the walls, Lila stood still, the towel still in her hand, the photo glowing faintly in the neon light. Somewhere in her heart she felt something awaken, a spark she couldn't name. Vakor turned toward the door, his wings shifting under his coat. "Close the diner," he said in a deep voice. "Tonight, the past is coming for you." Lila didn't understand, but as she looked into his burning eyes, she felt one truth rising inside her. The night at Ember's Den was only the beginning, and her mother's secret was far from dead. The next morning came with the sound of distant thunder. Clouds rolled above New Ember City, dark and heavy like smoke from an ancient battlefield. The diner Ember's Den stood quiet in the gray light, the smell of burned coffee still in the air. Lila sat alone at the counter, her hands wrapped around a mug. Her mind spinning from last night. Dragons, real dragons, had come into her diner and spoken her mother's name like it belonged in their history books. They said she carried something called the Mark of Fire. They acted like it was sacred, dangerous, impossible. Lila wanted to laugh, but her chest hurt when she tried. She hadn't slept every time she closed her eyes. She saw the golden eyes of the dragon called Vakor, the fear in them, and that strange word echoing in her mind, flameblood. The doorbell chimed again, soft this time. Lila looked up sharply, half expecting the dragons to return, but it was only an old delivery droid humming in, its rusty arms carrying a small crate. "Package for Ember's Den," it beeped, dropping it on the counter before leaving. Lila frowned. She hadn't ordered anything. The crate was sealed with black wax, a dragon crest pressed into it. Her fingers hesitated before she peeled it open. Inside lay a folded piece of dark fabric, like dragon hide, and a holochip. She placed the chip into the old reader behind the counter. The screen flickered. Then a face appeared. Scaled and tired, it was Vakor, the dragon general from last night. His voice filled the diner deep and low. "Human girl, you must not speak of the mark again," he said. "You do not understand its meaning or what you carry." Lila's heart pounded. She leaned closer to the screen. His image glowed faintly. "If your mother bore the Mark of Fire, she was no ordinary human," he continued. "The mark is not a tattoo. It is a bond, a dragon's life fire given to another soul." His eyes glowed gold as he spoke. "Only one human ever carried it, your mother." "Mira of the Firefront." Lila swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered, even though it was only a recording. Vakor's image leaned forward, his voice full of old pain. "Because that mark burns in your blood now," he said. "And there are those who would kill to erase it." The message flickered and ended. The holochip went dark. Lila stared at her reflection on the black screen, her own tired eyes staring back. She looked down at the dark fabric in the crate. It was a small cloak, heavy and warm. She lifted it to her face. It smelled faintly of smoke and something else, something alive. As she unfolded it, a small silver emblem fell out and hit the counter with a soft ring. It was shaped like a dragon wing wrapped around a flame, her mother's necklace, the one she used to wear every day. Lila's breath caught in her throat. "How?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "How do you have this?" "Mom." But the empty diner gave no answer. She turned the necklace over, and under the charm were small etched letters, "For the flame to rise again." Her mother used to say strange things sometimes, bedtime stories about dragons who fought for honor, about humans who kept promises across lifetimes. Lila thought they were just tales to help her sleep. Now she wasn't so sure. The door chimed again. But this time the sound was different. Sharp, commanding, 3 heavy steps followed. Lila looked up and froze. Vakor himself stood there. Not in hologram, but in flesh, tall, broad-shouldered, his cloak of black scales brushing the floor. Behind him came 2 dragons, their eyes wary. Before Lila could speak, Vakor raised his clawed hand. "I told you not to open it in public," he said, his voice deep like thunder. "You've already been seen," Lila frowned. "Seen by who?" Vakor looked around before closing the blinds with a sweep of his tail. The room dimmed. "There are dragons who never accepted peace," he said. "Hunters of the flame, they believe your mother's mark was a curse. They will come for you and for me." Lila shook her head. "This is insane. My mom was a mechanic. She worked in a scrapyard. She fixed toasters. Not dragons," Vakor interrupted softly. "Yet she saved my life at the siege of Orin's crater." His eyes met hers. "And I marked her with my own fire. She became one of us. Bonded through blood and flame." Lila's mind went blank. "You're saying my mom was part dragon?" "No," he said slowly. "But she carried our spirit. She bore the fire. And when she gave birth to you, something passed on." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "The mark is not ink, it's life energy. It burns in her line forever." Lila stumbled back, the counter pressing against her. "I don't believe you," she whispered, but her hand was trembling. She felt her chest burn faintly, like something under her skin was waking up. Vakor's expression softened, his voice quieter now. "Believe or not, the fire does not lie," he said. "Tell me, when you are angry, do you feel your heart burn?" Lila blinked, remembering moments of heat under her skin, moments when her emotions caused sparks around machines. Once she even melted a spoon by accident. She had blamed it on the cheap metal. Now she wasn't sure. Vakor noticed her silence. He nodded slowly. "The fire sleeps until danger comes," he said. "It is your mother's gift and her curse." Lila's voice trembled. "Why now?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Because the hunters have found your scent." Before Lila could respond, the glass window behind her cracked. A red laser cut through the wall. Heat filled the air. Vakor roared, his human form shattering into his true self. A massive dragon of black and gold, his wings spread wide, covering her from the blast. The air shook with his roar. "They've come too soon." The other dragons shifted as well. One breathed a shield of flame that melted the front door. Silhouettes moved outside, armored shapes, voices shouting in a tongue Lila didn't understand. She dropped to the floor, heart pounding. Sparks flickered from her fingertips. Vakor turned his massive head toward her, his eyes blazing. "Get up, Flameborn," he said. "It's time you learned what your blood can do." Lila stared at him, terrified, her hands trembling. "I'm just a waitress," she whispered. He bared his teeth in a grin, smoke curling from his nostrils. "Not anymore," he said. "You are the daughter of the fire, and the war is not done." Outside, the night exploded in red light. The windows burst inward, and the world Lila thought she knew vanished into flame. The mark of fire was no longer a secret. It was alive, and it had chosen her. The world outside Ember's den was chaos. The air burned red. The sound of energy blasts echoed through the streets. Glass rained down like sparks. Lila pressed herself behind the counter as flames crawled along the walls. Vakor's massive body shielded her. His wings spread wide. Scales glowing gold from the heat, he roared, a sound so powerful it shook the air itself. The hunters fell back, their black armor glinting under the firelight. "Stay low," Vakor growled, his deep voice rumbling like thunder. "Don't move unless I tell you." Lila's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips, in her chest. She peeked out from behind the counter and saw one of the hunters aiming a weapon, shaped like a long spear, glowing blue at the tip. It fired a beam of cold light that froze part of the wall into solid ice. Vakor roared again, melting it instantly with a wave of his fiery breath. Then she saw something strange. Her reflection in a shattered mirror behind the counter. Her eyes glowed faint amber. Veins of faint light pulsed along her arms. She blinked, fear and confusion rising together. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Vakor turned his great head toward her, his eyes fierce. "The fire inside you is waking," he said. "Do not fight it, but it hurts," she gasped, clutching her chest. "It burns, that is your blood remembering," he said, his tail sweeping across the floor, smashing through a fallen beam. "Your mother was marked with dragon flame, and now it stirs again in you." Lila didn't know what to believe. Her mother had been kind, soft-spoken. She never talked about the war, never about dragons, just stories of courage and unity. Now everything felt like those stories were more than bedtime tales. They were warnings outside. Another explosion rattled the windows. The second dragon, a female with silver scales, shouted something in dragon tongue. "Vakor, they are calling reinforcements." "They will trap us here," Vakor growled. "We hold until she awakens," he said. Lila stared at him. "Awakens," she repeated, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Before she could finish, the ground beneath her shook. A beam of white energy sliced through the roof. Tearing it open, she screamed as the ceiling fell. But Vakor caught the heavy beam in his claws and hurled it aside. Molten fragments showered over them. Lila's fear turned into something else, a pulse of anger. Hot and sharp, something inside her wanted to fight back. The hunter leader stepped through the flames. His armor black as coal, his mask shaped like a dragon skull, his voice cold and mechanical. "Surrender the Flameborn," he said. "The blood of the cursed human ends tonight." Lila's body trembled, but her heart didn't let her hide anymore. She stood up, her hands shaking but glowing faintly. "She wasn't cursed," she said. "She was my mother." The leader aimed his weapon. "Then you will burn like her." The moment he fired, something exploded inside her chest, not pain, but power. A surge of light burst from her hands. A shockwave of orange flame swept across the room. The energy hit the hunters like a storm, throwing them backward through the walls. The flames curved around Vakor and his allies but burned everything else. When it faded, silence followed. Lila gasped for breath. Her hands smoking, her clothes torn, her heart beat loud in her ears. She looked at her arms. They glowed faint gold, scales forming faintly over her skin. Her reflection in the broken glass showed her eyes burning bright amber. Vakor stared at her, not in anger or fear, but awe. "By the first flame," he whispered, "you carry it, the true bond." She passed it to you. Lila sank to her knees, dizzy and weak. "What did I do?" she whispered. The silver-scaled dragon knelt beside her, her voice soft. "You unleashed your mother's fire. The bond between human and dragon that was thought lost forever." Vakor nodded slowly. "It is called the Forgotten Bond," he said. "A link made not by spell or blood alone, but by choice and courage. Your mother forged it in the last battle of the war." Lila's head spun, her mind filled with images she didn't recognize. Fire, screaming skies, and a woman's voice calling a dragon's name. "Vakor," she whispered unconsciously. And his eyes widened. "You remember," he said quietly. "You see her memories." Lila clutched her head. "They're not mine, but they feel real," she whispered. She was fighting, she was falling, and there was light. Vakor's voice grew distant, almost mournful. "She saved me from the void cannon," he said. "When the machines unleashed their weapon, I was dying. She touched my heart with her hand and said, 'If I can burn with you, I'll never be cold again.' Then she disappeared." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "She never told me any of this." "She couldn't," said the silver dragon softly. "Those who carried the mark of fire were hunted even after peace. Dragons feared what they did not understand," Vakor nodded. "And humans feared what they could not control," he said. "She ran to protect you, hid among your kind. Erased her past." Lila wiped her tears roughly. "So now what?" she said. "You think I can fight like her?" Vakor's gaze hardened. "You already have," he said. "The hunters will return and worse will come. You are the last link between our worlds." Lila shook her head. "I'm no hero, I make coffee. I fix broken machines." Vakor lowered his head until his golden eyes met hers. "Your mother said the same thing," he said. "Until the day she saved a dragon army." Lila let out a shaky breath. Her fingers brushed the silver necklace she still wore. It felt warm now, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. She looked around the wrecked diner, the shattered glass, the burned tables, the scent of smoke. Her quiet life was gone, replaced by a fire she never asked for. "What happens now?" she whispered. Vakor turned toward the ruined door, the rising smoke outside glowing in the light of dawn. "Now," he said, "we find the truth your mother died for." Lila followed his gaze. The street outside was filled with black ash. Her reflection flickered in the glass, part human, part something else, something ancient and fierce. She didn't know who she really was anymore, but she knew one thing. She couldn't run from it. As the dragons spread their wings and the first light of morning hit their scales, Lila took a step forward, still trembling but no longer afraid. The forgotten bond had awakened, and with it, the legend of Mira's flame was about to rise again. The sun barely touched the smoky horizon as Lila followed the dragons through the ruins of New Ember City. The streets were silent except for the distant hiss of cooling metal. Signs of the attack still burned on walls and rooftops. Vakor led the way, his cloak torn, his scales dulled by soot. The silver-scaled dragon, whose name Lila now knew was Sarath, moved quietly behind them, her wings half folded under a long coat to hide her true form. They passed empty buildings, shattered vehicles, and flickering streetlights. Lila's boots crunched over broken glass. Her head spun with everything she had learned. She was the daughter of a human who had fought beside dragons. She carried fire inside her blood, and now she was being hunted by beings called the Flame Hunters. She still couldn't believe it. She had served coffee to merchants and repairmen only yesterday, and now she was walking between two dragons through the ashes of her old world. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, her voice echoing off the burned walls. "To the vault," Vakor said without looking back, his voice calm but heavy. "Where your mother's memory is sealed." "The vault," Lila repeated. "You mean like some kind of base?" Vakor glanced at her, his golden eyes sharp. "Not a base, a tomb," he said. "And maybe a truth the world tried to forget?" Lila swallowed hard. "You think she left something there?" "I know she did," he said. "She promised me once if she didn't survive. Her story would." The streets opened into a vast field of ruins beyond the city, half swallowed by sand and ash. Ancient war wreckage littered the ground, broken mechs, melted armor, shattered dragon bones that still shimmered faintly in the rising light. Lila stopped for a moment, staring in silence. "This is where it happened," Vakor said quietly. "The final stand. The day the Great Flame War ended," he pointed toward the horizon, where the ruins of a massive structure lay buried under the earth. "Orin's crater!" Lila's throat tightened. The name matched the vision she had seen in her dreams. The battlefield from her mother's memories, she could almost hear the screams, the roaring fire and the flash of white light. "How did she end up here?" she asked, "if the war ended?" "Why didn't she come home?" Sarath answered, her voice soft but cold. "Because there was no home left for her," she said. "Humans called her a dragon's pet. Dragons called her a human spy. The peace did not welcome heroes born from both sides." Lila looked down, her fists clenched. "She saved everyone, and they hated her." Vakor's voice rumbled low. "The world forgets its saviors quickly," he said. "That is why we came here, to remember." They reached the center of the crater. A giant circular door lay half buried in the ground, made of dark alloy that shimmered like glass, symbols of both human and dragon script carved across it. Half of them burned away. Lila ran her fingers across the letters. They glowed faintly under her touch. "She marked it with her fire," Vakor said. "Only her blood can open it." Lila looked at him. "You mean mine?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. Flameborn." Her heart pounded. She pressed her palm against the center of the door. It was cold at first. Then it began to warm. Light spread from her hand, glowing lines tracing across the metal, forming a pattern. A dragon and a human hand joined by a flame. The ground shook. Dust fell from the cracks as the door began to turn, opening with a deep metallic groan. Inside was darkness, and the faint hum of something ancient. Lila stepped in first, her footsteps echoing. The walls were lined with symbols and holographic panels, old data storage units still flickering weakly. In the center of the vault stood a small pedestal. On it was a crystal sphere pulsing with faint orange light. "What is that?" she whispered. Vakor approached slowly. "Her memory," he said. "A firestone, it holds the essence of her last thoughts. Her final act." Lila reached out to touch it. But the moment her fingers brushed the surface, light burst outward. The room filled with a holographic image. Her mother, Mira, standing in armor blackened by smoke, her face tired but fierce, her eyes bright with fire. "Mira Dawn," Vakor whispered, his voice trembling. "It's really her." The hologram flickered, Mira's voice soft but strong. "If you're watching this, then I failed to come home," she said. "And if my daughter lives, she must know the truth." Lila's breath caught. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes wide. Mira continued, her tone calm even as firelight flickered behind her. "They said the mark of fire was a curse, but they were wrong. It was the bond that ended the war. Dragons and humans were never meant to destroy each other. We were meant to share strength. But fear won." She paused, looking straight ahead. "I saw that fear in the eyes of kings and generals. So I hid what I carried. Your spark, Lila. The flame that will outlive both species." Lila's tears fell silently, her mother's voice echoing around her. If you are hearing me, child, they will come for you. They will fear you as they feared me, but do not run, she said. The fire in you is not meant to burn the world. It's meant to light it again. The hologram dimmed, then flickered one last time. Mira's voice softer now. And Vakor, if you live, protect her as you swore you would. Vakor lowered his head. Eyes closed. Always, he whispered, his claws tightening around the broken ground. Then the firestone cracked, light spilling into Lila's chest. She gasped, the warmth flooding her body. Visions flashed before her eyes, dragons flying beside human ships. Her mother standing between armies, fire and metal clashing in the sky. The last explosion that ended everything, and through it all, one promise repeated in her mother's voice. The flame will rise again. When the light faded, the vault was quiet again. Only the sound of her own breath echoed. Lila stood trembling, a faint glow pulsing under her skin. She left it all here, she whispered. Her story, her power, her promise. Vakor placed a massive clawed hand gently on her shoulder. And now you carry it, he said, but remember, light draws both hope and shadow. And there are those who wish to keep the world dark. Lila looked up at him, her fear replaced by something new, resolve. Then we'll burn the darkness away, she said quietly. Vakor's eyes glowed with pride, the fire reflected in them. You truly are your mother's child, he said. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, falling across the crater, touching the ashes with golden light. And for the first time in years, the dragons looked up, not with regret, but with hope. The flame had not died. It had been reborn in a human girl who was ready to finish what her mother started. The flame of the forgotten bond burned once more, waiting to change the world again. The journey back from Orin's crater was long and heavy. The wind carried ash across the barren plains, and the sky looked bruised, purple streaks cutting through dull gray clouds. Lila walked between Vakor and Serath, the firestone now glowing faintly under her jacket. She could still feel it pulsing like a second heartbeat, as if her mother's soul lived inside it, whispering through every step. They took shelter in the remains of an old cargo hub, half buried in sand and smoke. Once a trading post between human soldiers and dragon messengers during the war, now only rust and silence remained. Lila sat near a broken generator, her hands trembling as she tried to absorb what she had seen. She had witnessed her mother's final memory. She had felt the bond awaken in her blood, and now she was supposed to carry the fire that once united two races who nearly destroyed each other. Vakor's deep voice broke the quiet. You must learn control, he said, his golden eyes fixed on the flickering flame she had lit without touching it. That fire is not magic, it is life itself. It feeds on your emotions, your heart, your pain. Lila stared at the small dancing flame hovering above her palm. It feels alive, she whispered, like it's breathing with me. It is, Serath said, watching her carefully. The flame knows fear, anger, hope. It reflects what you feel if you lose balance. It will consume you. Lila nodded weakly. How did my mom control it? She didn't at first, Vakor said. She burned half a battlefield before learning to focus. But she learned through trust, not fear. Lila looked up at him. Trust in what? Vakor's gaze softened. In herself and in the bond she shared with us, he said. The bond between human and dragon was never meant to control. It was meant to share life. Lila watched the flame flicker, her thoughts spinning. You said my mother wasn't supposed to have a child, she said slowly. Why? The dragons exchanged glances. Serath looked uneasy, but Vakor finally spoke. Because the fusion of dragon fire and human blood was forbidden, he said. The bond mark carries our essence, it should have faded with her. But she carried it too long, and when you were born, the fire passed to you, half human, half flame. Lila frowned. So I'm not really human, Vakor shook his head. You are more human than most. Because you carry both sides you can choose, he said. But to dragons who fear the old days, you are an abomination. To humans who still hate dragons, you are a weapon. Lila's chest tightened. The fire above her hand flickered dark. Then what am I supposed to be, she whispered. A bridge or a target? Both, Serath said quietly. And that's why they will keep hunting you. Before Lila could respond, a sharp metallic sound echoed through the air, then another. A distant hum like thunder rolling closer. Vakor turned his head sharply toward the sky. They've found us, he growled. His wings twitching under his cloak, Serath hissed. How they shouldn't have been able to track through the ash storms. Vakor's nostrils flared. They're using scent traces. They want her blood, he said. Get her underground, Lila stood up. Fear rising. No, I can fight, she said. But her voice shook. Not yet, Vakor snapped. His tone not angry, but protective. You don't know your limits, and they won't give you a chance to learn. The sky cracked open with red streaks of energy as sleek black dropships descended, emblazoned with the sigil of the flame hunters. Mechanical wings spreading wide. The sound of jet engines roared over the plains. Dust rising in violent swirls, Lila's heart raced, the ground trembling beneath her feet. Sarath grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward a hatch buried beneath debris. Move, she ordered. There's a tunnel below. It leads to the old fusion pits, Vakor stepped forward, his cloak falling away, scales shimmering like molten gold. I'll hold them off, he said. Wait, Lila cried. You can't fight them alone. He turned his head slightly, giving her a small smile. I fought alone long before you were born, Flameborn, he said. Now run. The last thing she saw before Sarath forced her down the tunnel was Vakor unleashing a river of flame that turned the desert sky red. The shockwave shook the earth, metal screamed, and light poured through the cracks. The tunnel was dark and narrow, the walls humming faintly from old energy lines buried deep underground. Sarath moved quickly, guiding Lila through twisting passages. This place was built during the early war, she said. Humans tried to fuse dragon fire into reactors, thought they could make endless energy. Instead, they made death. Lila looked around, faint orange light reflecting on her face. Is that what I am? She said softly. A reactor waiting to explode. Sarath stopped and turned to her, eyes glowing silver in the dark. No, you are proof that life can exist between two impossible worlds, she said. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. They reached a chamber lined with old machinery. Half-broken reactors still glowing faintly blue. A faint vibration shook the air. Then a voice echoed through the tunnel. It was Vakor, but not in words. It was in her mind, deep and resonant. Run, Flameborn, the fire calls to you. Vakor, she whispered, clutching her chest. She could feel his flame through the bond, like heat spreading through her veins, but there was also pain, sharp and raw. He's hurt, she gasped. Sarath's face darkened. He's buying us time, she said, but they'll kill him if we don't act. Lila's fear turned to anger. The flame in her blood ignited again, glowing lines spreading across her skin. I'm not leaving him, she said, her voice trembling with power. He protected me. I won't let him burn alone. Sarath reached out to stop her, but the heat from Lila's body pushed her back. The girl's eyes burned bright gold now. The air shimmered around her. Lila, no, Sarath warned. You can't control it yet. But Lila didn't hear her anymore. She turned toward the tunnel entrance, her mother's firestone glowing like a small sun under her clothes, her hands clenched into fists of light. If this power came from her, then I'll use it for what she believed in, she whispered. To protect life, not run from it, she raised her hand, and the tunnel walls cracked with a low rumble. Her body surrounded by streams of orange fire. She felt Vakor's voice again in her mind. Faint and fading, do not let it break you, Lila. Become the flame. The fire burst outward. Wrapping around her like wings, the ground split open, and Lila shot upward through the tunnel in a column of flame, her scream turning into a roar that echoed through the skies. Above, the flame hunters froze in midair as a new light erupted below them, a blaze brighter than dawn. Lila rose from the crater, her eyes blazing, fire flowing like liquid across her arms. She looked at the burning sky, then at the dragons fighting for her, and whispered one word that carried across the battlefield. Enough! The fire exploded outward in a wave of molten light that tore through metal and shadow alike. The hunters fell from the sky like dark stars, and for the first time, both dragons and humans on the ground looked up, not in fear, but in awe. The blood of fire and flesh had awakened, and the world would never be the same again. Smoke curled around the shattered cargo hub. The ground glowed red from the battle, and the air smelled of ash and ozone. The flame hunters had been scattered by the explosion, their ships torn apart by heat and light. When the firestorm finally faded, Lila stood at the center of the crater, the dust swirling slowly around her, her eyes no longer human. They glowed gold with streaks of molten amber. Faint scales shimmered across her arms. Her breath came out in waves of smoke. Vakor lay nearby, his massive form burned and cracked, molten veins pulsing under his dark scales. Yet his eyes were still alive. He tried to lift his head but collapsed with a low growl. Lila stumbled toward him, her steps shaky but determined. Don't move, she said softly, her voice trembling. I've got you. The golden dragon's eyes opened, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. You found the flame, he rumbled, his deep voice weak but proud. Your mother would have been proud. Lila knelt beside him, her hands hovering over the wounds glowing faintly with firelight. You're hurt, she said. I can fix it. You cannot heal me with fire, he murmured. It burns both ways, but Lila ignored him, closing her eyes, feeling the warmth rising inside her chest. She reached deep past her fear, past the pain, and the flame answered, soft at first, then stronger. Her hands glowed gold as she pressed them against his scales. Light spread like ripples across his wounds. The fire didn't burn this time, it felt calm, almost gentle. Vakor gasped as the cracks in his armor sealed slowly. Sarath landed nearby, folding her silver wings with a metallic whisper. Her eyes widened as she saw what Lila was doing. She's channeling healing fire, she whispered. That's impossible. That art was lost ages ago. It's her mother's gift, Vakor said, his breathing slowing as the fire faded. The bond remembers. Lila opened her eyes, exhausted, her hands shaking. You're okay now, she said, but her voice wavered. She felt drained, like the fire had taken half of her strength. She fell to one knee, breathing hard. Vakor gently nudged her shoulder with his snout. Rest, Flameborn. Even dragons cannot hold the flame for long. Lila looked up at the red sky, the clouds burned by battle. They'll come again, she whispered. They won't stop, Sarath nodded grimly. The hunters will regroup, they never accept defeat. And now that they've seen what you are, they'll call the elders. The elders, Lila repeated. Who are they? Ancient dragons, Vakor said. Older than the war, older than peace, they believe the mark of fire was blasphemy. They will come to end what they call impurity. Lila clenched her fists, the glow under her skin flickering faintly. So everyone wants me dead, she said bitterly. Humans, hunters, now dragons. Sarath stepped closer, her voice firm but kind. Not everyone, child. Some will see what your mother saw, hope. Hope doesn't stop fire, Lila whispered. It just gets burned with everything else. Vakor's eyes glowed softly. You sound like her, he said. But even she learned that fire can burn or it can warm. The choice is always yours. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying distant thunder. Lila turned toward the horizon. Faint red lights blinked in the clouds, ships moving fast. The hunters were returning, but there was something else in the sky, too. A great shadow forming above the storm, vast and ancient. The air grew heavy as a deep rumble rolled through the ground. Sarath's wings flared in alarm. They're here, she hissed. The elders. Lila felt the heat in her chest rise, the fire inside her responding instinctively to the presence above. What do they want from me, she asked. Vakor looked up at the clouds. To judge you, he said simply. To decide whether your fire belongs to life or to destruction. Lightning split the sky, and 3 massive shapes descended through the clouds. Wings as large as cities, scales that shimmered like molten stone. The air trembled with their presence. The ground cracked under the pressure of their landing. Each of them radiated power older than time. The lead dragon's eyes burned with blue-white fire. Vakor of the broken wing, the elder spoke, his voice echoing through the air like thunder. You stand with the Flameborn, the forbidden child. Explain yourself. Vakor bowed his head, his golden scales dimming. I stand with her because I stood with her mother, he said. Because she carries the bond we swore to protect, the elder's voice hardened. You swore to destroy it, not protect it. The bond defied nature. It merged fire and flesh, Lila stepped forward, despite the weight of their gaze pressing on her like mountains. You talk about nature, she said. But nature changes, doesn't it? Dragons breathe fire. Humans breathe air, and I breathe both. Maybe that's what we were meant to be. The elder turned his burning gaze on her. You speak with the arrogance of youth, he said. Do you know how many burned because of that fire? I know how many died because you couldn't share it, she said, her voice shaking but strong. My mother didn't start the war. She ended it. She chose to give instead of destroy. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then the elder roared, a sound so loud it split the sky. The force sent waves of dust through the crater. You dare speak her name, he thundered. That traitor burned our laws and defied our kind. Vakor's head shot up, his voice a deep growl. She saved us all, he roared back, and without her, your kind would be nothing but bones in the dirt. The elders turned their gaze toward him. But before they could respond, Lila's anger exploded. The fire within her surged like a storm. Her skin glowed. Her hair lifted as heat rippled through the air. "Enough!" she screamed, and the word carried power. Flames burst from the ground around her, circling her like a fiery halo. The elders recoiled slightly. The earth cracked open beneath her feet. Her voice trembled but rang clear. "You call me forbidden, you call her traitor. But I've seen what your pride costs. Cities burned, people dead, dragons hiding in shame. You don't guard the flame anymore. You smother it." The lead elder's eyes narrowed. "You would challenge the ancient fire," he said. "You a half-born?" Lila's voice grew calm, her fire burning steady now. "No," she said softly. "I'm not challenging your fire, I'm becoming it." The light exploded around her. Not wild or destructive this time, but alive, warm, radiant. Vakor and Sarath shielded their eyes as the glow consumed the crater. When it faded, Lila stood changed, her eyes no longer gold, but white flame, her veins glowing with pure light. The mark of fire now burned across her back like living wings. The elders stared in silence, their ancient pride trembling before something they hadn't seen in centuries. "Not a weapon, not a curse, but balance," Vakor whispered in awe. "She's done it. The fire within is awake." The lead elder lowered his head slowly. "Perhaps the bond was never our curse," he said quietly, his voice breaking through the smoke. "Perhaps it was our redemption." The clouds began to part, letting sunlight touch the battlefield again. The fire around Lila dimmed but never faded. She looked at Vakor and Sarath, exhausted but calm, and said quietly, "Then it's time we start rebuilding, not burning." The dragons bowed their heads, and for the first time since the Great War, flame and flesh stood together again, not as enemies, but as one living fire that could not be destroyed, only reborn. The morning after the storm burned clear and silent. The world still trembled from what had happened. The clouds above New Ember City were torn apart by fire and light, leaving behind a sky so bright it looked new beneath it. Dragons and humans stood side by side among the ruins, staring at the horizon where a single figure glowed faintly. Lila, the flameborn, her eyes calm, her breath steaming in the cool air. The elders had left before dawn, their wings fading into the rising sun. They said nothing more, only left behind silence and a faint trail of heat in the clouds. The war that had slept in whispers for decades was over, not through death or victory, but through something neither side had expected. A human girl who carried both fire and heart. Lila sat beside the ruins of Ember's Den, her diner, what was once a small corner of peace between two worlds, now a crater of melted steel and broken memories. She brushed ash from an old sign that still read, "Coffee served hot," her fingers shaking slightly. "Guess that's still true," she whispered, smiling faintly. Vakor's shadow fell across her, his massive form now healed, his golden scales reflecting the sunlight. He had taken his true shape again, towering and ancient, yet his eyes looked softer now. "You should rest," he said. "The fire takes more than it gives." Lila looked up at him, the wind tugging her hair. "Rest later," she said quietly. "There's too much to rebuild." Sarath landed beside them, folding her silver wings, her voice light but cautious. "The humans in the city are afraid," she said. "They saw the sky burn, they saw dragons fight again. They don't know what to believe. They'll believe what they see next," Lila said, standing, her hand brushing the firestone under her jacket. "If all they've seen are monsters, then we'll show them something different." Vakor tilted his head. "And what will you show them?" Lila turned toward the broken skyline, her reflection flickering in the pools of melted glass. "That fire can build as well as destroy," she said. "My mother didn't fight to end the world. She fought to give it another chance." The dragon studied her for a long moment, then gave a deep rumbling nod. "Then let the flame be yours to guide," he said. "We will follow." She looked surprised. "Follow me." Vakor's eyes glowed faintly. "You carry the bond that even time could not kill," he said. "Your mother gave her life to create it, and you gave yours to awaken it. We have fought long enough. Perhaps it is time we listen to the daughter of the flame." Sarath smiled faintly, her silver eyes soft. "You don't just burn, Lila," she said. "You shine." Lila blinked back tears, the heat in her chest warm but gentle now. She walked toward the center of the ruins, where the ashes of the old diner still smoked. Kneeling, she pressed her palm into the ground. The firestone pulsed against her chest, a faint orange light spreading beneath her hand. Slowly the cracked tiles began to glow, the metal bending and reshaping under her touch. In moments, the ground rippled with light, the shape of the diner returning not perfect, not polished but alive. The humans who had been hiding nearby gasped, watching from behind the broken streets. A few stepped forward, hesitant, their faces filled with awe and fear. Lila stood among the rising steam, her hands glowing softly. "This place was meant for everyone," she said, her voice calm. "Dragons, humans, anyone who wanted peace," one of the human workers shouted. "You're one of them." Lila turned, her gaze steady. "I'm one of both," she said. "And maybe that's what we were supposed to be all along." There was silence. Then the old man stepped closer, his voice trembling. "You could have killed us all last night." "Why didn't you?" Lila smiled softly. "Because fire doesn't always have to kill," she said. "Sometimes it just clears the way for new things to grow." Behind her, Vakor lowered his massive head, the golden light from his scales reflecting off the shattered walls. "Your mother said the same words once," he murmured. "On a battlefield that burned for 3 days." Lila turned to him, smiling faintly. "Then I guess I'm still learning from her." More humans came out and more dragons landed nearby. Some in human form, some towering like mountains, both sides watching each other in tense silence, the air thick with uncertainty. Then a small human child stepped forward. Holding a cracked cup in both hands, she looked up at the dragons fearlessly. "Can you make it warm again?" she asked. Her voice small. Lila knelt, took the cup gently, and breathed into it. A faint golden flame flickered to life. Heating the liquid inside, steam rose softly. She handed it back to the girl. "See?" she said with a smile. "Fire isn't bad, it's what you do with it." The crowd watched in silence. Then one of the dragons rumbled with amusement. "The child of Mira teaches wisdom through tea." Everyone laughed softly, the first laughter in years between their kinds. The sound gentle but real as the day turned to evening. The first new lights flickered across the city. Dragons helping repair collapsed towers, humans clearing debris beside them, flames and hands working together. For the first time since the war, the sky was filled with light not from destruction but from creation. Lila sat on the rebuilt steps of Ember's den as the stars appeared one by one, the air cool, the scent of smoke fading. Vakor rested nearby, watching her quietly. "You have done what no army could," he said. "You gave the fire peace." She looked up at the stars. "I didn't give it peace," she said softly. "I just reminded it what it was for." Vakor smiled, a sound like distant thunder in his chest. "Your mother would have been proud." Lila's eyes glistened. "I hope she's watching," she whispered. "I hope she knows we're finally home." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and flowers. For a moment she thought she heard a voice, soft, familiar. "I'm always here, little flame." Lila smiled, looking out at the horizon where the stars met the world. She whispered, "Then I'll keep the fire burning." "Mom." The neon sign flickered back to life above her. Ember's den, glowing red and gold against the night sky. Dragons perched on rooftops, humans laughing nearby, the city alive again, no longer divided by fear or flame. And in that quiet glow, the daughter of the flame closed her eyes, her mother's fire warm in her chest, her world reborn in its light. The age of war had ended, not by sword or by roar, but by a waitress who spoke a single truth that changed everything. Fire does not destroy. It remembers, it rebuilds, it lives, and now it burns for peace forever.